Are you a loyal fan of a particular team or sport? And no matter how they're doing, you're with them. You're voting for them, applauding them. And despite, of course, we always like a winner, but even when they're cellar dwellers, and but you're loyal to the end. You keep that hope, that fire of hope burning. And if you're one of those type people, I applaud you. That's very loyal. Or are you like the other guys or other group where you're kind of a fair weather friend and you like your team, local team, or maybe your team where you went to college? But only if they're good. In the meantime, you're more than happy, excuse me, to just jump. And I don't blame people for doing that. But I'm going to tell you of a team, if you will, of a God that's invincible, undefeated. So when you choose him, when you become a fan of him, you don't have to worry if they're going to have a lousy season next year or their big stars will get traded or whatever, because he is invincible, undefeated, and I can promise you, since he's a champion and you're his fan, then you're right with him. You're a champion of the champion. And so I'm glad you're with me. I'm Brian, Faith, Fit, Psalms, and I invite you to subscribe if you'd like. I'm on a series right now, this one particular, on that is what God is like. You have to actually say it like that. You can't say, that is what God is like. That is what God is like. So you can join me if you'd like. You may say, "Man, you're kind of a fanatic. You're like really enthusiastic." And you know what? I used to be for my sports teams when I lived in New York, my high school, my college team. But then I got born again, and all of a sudden, I got a glimpse of the awesomeness, the invincibility, the champion that is our God. And so I watch sports. Yeah, I enjoy it for what it's worth, but I am a fanatic for the living God. And I hope you can catch that same thing I've got. So we're going to look at a short passage in the Psalms that's going to set up this invincibility thing about God. And then we'll go to an amazing but true story in the Old Testament. And again, if you'd like to subscribe, just go ahead and do that. If you want to click that button that says, "Hey, the next time this guy's got something going on," you'll be alerted to it. You won't be disappointed. As I start, just want to pray for your heart, that your heart will take courage wherever you are in life. It'll take courage and it'll take hope that as we read this story, instead of going, that's too good to be true, your heart will take courage. It'll have hope to go, if God could do it then to them, then he can do it for me. Because that is what our God is like. So here we are in Psalm 24. This is a Psalm of David. And he knew this firsthand because David was a mighty warrior. And under his kingship, Israel expanded the kingdom to probably the greatest height, probably the greatest height of Israel's kingdom gathering. So it says here, verse 7, "Open up ancient gates, open up ancient doors, and let the King of glory," and he's not talking about himself, "the King of glory enter." So you can imagine they're in a walled castle or fort, and open up ancient gates, open up ancient doors, let the King of glory enter. Of course, the people, the guards on the poster say, "Who is the King of glory?" And here's the answer: "The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, invincible in battle." Well, I want to be on that team. And then it says it again: "Open up ancient gates, open up ancient doors, let the King of glory enter." Who's this King of glory? Why should I open up my doors of my heart? Well, open up the gates of my home and the gates of my kingdom here, my walled city. Who's the King of glory? The Lord Almighty, all might. He is the King of glory. That's what our God is like. He's invincible. He has all might and power is his. So that's just a few verses. I just wanted to set the base. Open up your heart. Let your heart take courage and let him come in. Open up the gates of your heart that the King of glory, the King invincible in battle. Are you in any battles? Any struggles, sin, depression, financial difficulties? What? How do you combat those things? How do you fight back? Well, I'm going to recommend that you invite the King of Glory, the invincible God, into your life. Let your heart take courage and do that. And then watch what God will do for you. So we're going to go all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 13 and 14. And this is a story, I'll kind of run through it, but I'll highlight some of the key verses here. It's a true story. Saul is now the king, and one of his duties as a king is to defend Israel. And Israel and the Philistines are constantly fighting for land and territory. And sometimes the Israelites are in the ascendancy, sometimes the Philistines set the Israelites back. So we're in this situation, and Saul has 3,000 warriors, and they had gone out and they destroyed a garrison of the Philistines. So the Philistines got really ticked off, and they just gathered all their people. So now Saul's got his 3,000. They literally have 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and so many troops, they couldn't even number them. But let's just say this, more than 6,000, more than the 3,000 he had. Now, in the meantime, while all this was happening, because it doesn't happen overnight, of those 3,000 that Saul had with him, 2,400 just got a reminder, oh, I forgot something at home, and they started taking off. Some of them hid in wells and ditches and caves. Others some of them actually joined the Philistines because they figured, I know who's going to win this, so I'm going to be on your side. And because they wanted to live. Others just fled, just got out of Dodge. So all of a sudden, Saul looks around. He's got 600 people with him at this time. So this is in 1 Samuel chapter 13. And in verse 16, when Saul counted the men, in verse 15, he counted the men who were still with him. He found only 600 left. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you can't run after them and bring them back because you'll get killed doing that. So he just says, I got 600. So Saul and Jonathan, by the way, is his son, his oldest son. He's going to be the next king, since normally kings have a lineage there. And Saul and Jonathan were troops with him. And here's another factor to make this story even more amazing. At that time, the Philistines were kind of in control of Israel, and there were no blacksmiths in Israel. That's later on in chapter 13. It tells you that because the Philistines are smart enough to realize if we allow you to have blacksmiths, then you're going to fake like you're sharpening your tools for the agricultural and your plows, but really you're going to be making swords and spears. So at this time, not only does he have 600 men, but there are only two weapons. Saul, the king, has one, and Jonathan has one. That's in verse 22. So the people of Israel had a sword. None of them had a sword and a spear except for Saul and Jonathan. So that sets the table. We've got 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, too many people to lead against 600 people, two weapons, Saul and Jonathan. Now we pick it up in chapter 14. So one day, because they weren't doing a lot of attacking, they were actually in a garrison just trying to hold on, see what God was going to do. One day, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, he said, come, let's go over to the Philistines on the other side of this gorge and let's see what's going to happen. Let's go over to with the Philistines. But he didn't tell his dad, his king father there. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men were camped. And So no one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. So in verse 4, to reach the outpost, Jonathan had to go down between two rocky cliffs. And then he says to his armor bearer, hey, let's go across to see these pagans, these Philistines. And his armor bearer said, and he said to his armor bearer, so he said, let's go over. Perhaps the Lord will give us, will help us for nothing. Listen to this. Nothing in verse 16, or verse 6 actually. Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle with a lot of troops or a few troops. Of course, it was just Jonathan and his armor bearer. So he's saying, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle with many warriors or just me and you. That is shocking faith. And you know what his armor bearer says in verse 7? Do what you think is best. I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. He says, okay, so now I'm not going by myself. It's always nice to have a partner, right? Always nice to have somebody else with you. So he gets this idea, our God is an amazing God. He doesn't save by many or by few, because if God gets involved, there will be victory, because he understood that God was invincible. It's one thing to say that in the quiet of your heart or a room or a church or in your quiet times. It's another thing when there are more of them than there are of you saying, my God is able. Woo! So anyway, so Jonathan says, okay, so I got another idea. First of all, I had the idea that we should go over there, and you're willing to do that. So let's just see what's going to happen. So this is what we'll do. This is how we'll test to see if God's on his side. We'll cross over and let them see us. Okay? If they say to us, stay where you are or we'll kill you, then we'll come back, because that means the Lord's not with us. But if they say, come on up here and fight, then we'll go up, because that is a sign that God will defeat them. Now, do you imagine how crazy, foolish that sounds? But faith was in their hearts. They just said, these Philistines, they cannot stand up against the living God. They must have known their God was amazing. So when the Philistines saw them, they crawled over there. They said, look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes. Then they shouted, come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson. So come on up, climb up behind. So Jonathan starts climbing up, and they were going up like a sheer cliff. So they'd use their hands and their feet and to get up there. And when they finally got up, I guess they had to readjust, get their armor, get a sword. And so they climbed up using both hands in verse 13, and the Philistines fell back as Jonathan and his armor bearer killed them. They killed about 20 men in all and about a half an acre. I live on a half an acre property, so I just looked around and said, okay. I climb up, the soldiers, and he kills one, then he kills another, and by the end of it, 20 soldiers are killed. But remember this, how many do they have? They have like unnumbered, too many to count. But listen to this. They killed about 20 in verse 14, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly, panic broke out in the Philistine army, not just in that little half acre, in the army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outpost and raiding parties. And just then, an earthquake came, and everybody was terrified. Earthquake. You'll see as you listen to more of that is what God is like. Earthquakes are in a lot of these scriptures. The earth trembles at his presence. The earth quakes at his might and power. And the enemies often, when God shows up, Israel took strength, and his enemies were terrified. Now, in the meantime, while this is happening, okay, Saul knows nothing what's going on. Jonathan has killed 20, but now terror has come upon. Earthquake came. God started showing up, and And the Philistines, they didn't know what was going on. They were panicking. Panic broke out. Saul's looks out. We're looking across the gorge, and they said, yeah, hey, Saul, something really kind of funny going on. This vast army of the Philistines is beginning to melt away in every direction. And then Saul says, find out who's not here. And but before he actually figures it out, they start to go out to battle. And they found, when they went out to battle in verse 20, they found that the Philistines were killing each other. Jonathan and his armor bearer took a step of faith. God showed up, the invincible God. He shook them, caused them to run in confusion, melt away. They started killing each other. Oh my gosh. There was terrible confusion, verse 26, everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul and Jonathan and the rest of the Israelites. Remember, the rest of the Israelites is only 600 people. Likewise, the men who were hiding in the hills joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running. Well, yeah, that's easy to do, but when it was time for them to man up, they hid and they joined the other forces. But even with that great victory, the turncoats, the cowards rejoined them. So the Lord saved Israel that day in verse 23. Is that shocking? That's why I said you have to let your heart take courage. Look what happened here. 600 with 2 weapons down to 2 against a horde of the enemy. Jonathan simply said, hey, you want to go over and check out what the Philistines are doing? Perhaps God will work for us, because as I know the Lord, he's not limited to save by many or by few. God and you, God and me, is the majority. Invincible in battle. And then he shook the camp. They were in confusion. They melted away. They started fighting each other. And then the 600 men, I guess they came there, took some of the soldiers' swords that, had been killed, and they just started slaying people. And the Lord delivered them. That's our God. That's our God. What can he do for you? Perhaps God will do something dramatic in your life if you'll trust him. And a reversal will come. A sickness will be reversed. A financial difficulty reversed. Or maybe you have money, but you want more so you can be a blessing. He reverses the lack. And he causes our enemies to fight and flee. It just takes a step of faith. So I boast, I'm a fanatic for the God who's invincible, that the God who did it for Jonathan and his armor bearer will do it for you, will do it for me, because he loves you and he's just waiting. He waits on high to have compassion on you. So look at that story. Read it again. If you have kids, read it to your kids and say, that is what our God is like. And he's the same God today, yesterday, and forever. And so all I got to do is believe him and trust him and wait on him and take that step of faith. I bless you. I boast in the Lord. Make it a prayer. Grab some of my other videos and build a momentum of the greatness of God so you can trust him, because that is what God is like. God is like. Hey, peace. I bless you.